Welcome everybody to the SolarAPP Plus Roundtable discussion hosted by the International Code Council. I'm Joan O'Neill. I am the Chief Knowledge Officer of the ICC, leading our digital transformation strategy. We are very excited to be able to share important milestones with you today regarding the SolarAPP Plus application. We have an exciting panelist team here, and we're going to dive in. First, next slide, Jeff. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the International Code Council. We are the leading global source of model codes and standards and building safety solutions. Code Council codes, standards, and our solutions are used to ensure safe, affordable, and sustainable communities and buildings worldwide. We have an extensive reach for our organization. We have members in 38 countries. We release 15 codes on a 3-year cycle. We have 12 standards. We nearly 2 million people annually are impacted by the I-codes. And we have a strong and dedicated membership organization, 65,000 and growing worldwide. So we're very excited, as I said earlier, to be hosting this milestone event. Now, up next, I'd like to introduce our host for the panel discussion, Dr. Jeff Cook. He is the project lead for SolarAPP Plus. The ICC has a longstanding working relationship with Jeff and NREL. And the team has really been focused on increasing adoption of code-compliant solar energy solutions, which really speaks directly to the mission of ICC to ensure safe and sustainable communities worldwide. So now over to you, Jeff, to kick off our panelist discussion.
Thanks so much, Joan, and thanks again to the International Code Council for hosting this event, and we're very excited to jump right into it. So, of course, I am from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We are the developers of the Solar Automated Permit Processing Plus platform, also affectionately known, of course, as SolarAPP Plus. And so we're very excited to jump in. We've got, as Joan mentioned, a roundtable discussion, of course, with members of the Department of Energy, as well as ICC code officials, UL, et cetera, and of course, the city of Phoenix. So we're very excited to have the mayor with us today. In addition, we'll be talking about the performance of the application over the course of its first year. So if you don't get all your questions answered by the panelists, you'll certainly will get them answered in relation to the performance review that has been completed. So it's my esteemed honor, of course, to welcome to the stage today Garrett Nilsson. He is currently the Deputy Director of the Solar Energy Technologies Office within the U.S. Department of Energy. Of course, he is helping lead all of our national efforts in the advancement and research of solar technologies broadly, and of course, is the funder for the SolarAPP itself. So Garrett's going to kick us off with an introduction to our first speaker today. So Garrett, are you there?
I am there. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, the International Code Council, for helping today, and just how thrilled we are to be working both with NREL and the International Code Council. So it's my pleasure to be introducing Kelly Speaks-Bachman, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy here at the Department of Energy. She focuses on creating and sustaining an American leadership in the global clean energy economy transition. She oversees the planning and execution of a $3.2 billion annual budget focused on research, development, demonstration, and deployment of new technologies in energy efficiency, renewable energy, and sustainable transportation. Speaks-Bachman most recently served as the first CEO, I should say, of the Energy Storage Association, which is the national trade organization for the energy storage industry. She spent more than 20 years working on energy environmental issues in the public, NGO, and private sectors. In 2019, Speaks-Bachman was honored by the Cleany Awards as Woman of the Year. So without further ado, let's hear a message from our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Speaks-Bachman, and I lead the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy here at the Department of Energy. I am excited to participate in today's webinar and to talk about the SolarAPP Plus. As many of you may be aware, the cost of solar panels has decreased 80% in the last decade. While that's really exciting, the permitting process to put them on rooftops has not achieved similar gains in efficiency. In many places, solar permits are still filed on paper, and these outdated systems lead to major delays in getting rooftop solar connected to the grid, which costs permitting agencies and consumers installation, and that's where SolarAPP Plus comes more complex priorities. Solar companies won't have to face lengthy delays before they're able to install solar on residential rooftops. And consumers can save money and reap the benefits of solar faster. So why is SolarAPP important to us here at the Department of Energy? Well, our goal is to accelerate the development and the deployment of solar technologies to support an equitable transition to a decarbonized electric system by 2035 and a decarbonized economy by 2050. Achieving this goal is going to support nationwide efforts to meet the threat of climate change and to ensure that all Americans benefit from the transition to a clean energy economy. SolarAPP plays a big role in that. Now, I won't steal the thunder from today's webinar speakers, but a new report from NREL shows just how effective SolarAPP has been in its first full year of operation. And we at DOE are so thrilled to watch this platform continue to grow. In today's webinar, you'll also be hearing from several of our partners on SolarAPP, City of Phoenix, Sunrun, UL, and the webinar's host, the International Code Council. They each bring a unique perspective on how automated permitting can accelerate solar deployment, just as they've brought unique, valuable perspectives to SolarAPP's development and adoption. So if you're not convinced yet that SolarAPP has a lot to offer, stay tuned. Stay tuned to the rest of this webinar to learn how simple it could be for your community to speed up solar adoption.
All right, and thank you so much to the Assistant Secretary for those words to kick us off today. And certainly we've got a group of panelists to continue the conversation that she certainly has kicked off for us. So we're very excited to talk more, of course, about how SolarAPP works, how it's been working in the communities, including Phoenix and elsewhere across the country. And so with that, I want to, of course, introduce and bring back our panelists into the conversation today. We have an esteemed group, of course, starting with, of course, Garrett Nielsen from the U.S. Department of Energy, who we've already introduced, as well as Joan O'Neill from the International Code Council. She'll also be joining us again here in this component of the session, as well as Mayor Gallegos, of course, from the City of Phoenix. We'll be hearing from her in a minute, and Ken Boyce from UL, and of course, Amy Hart from Sunrun. So thanks to all the panelists for joining us today. If you have questions for the panelists or at any time in this session, or if you have questions about the Assistant Secretary's conversation thus far, please do go ahead and put those questions in the chat for me, and we can go ahead and address those in the session itself. All right, so with that, we're going to kick off the conversation, continuing with the Department of Energy, focusing with Garrett to start us off. And so Garrett, the first question for you is just to talk a little bit more or build on what the Assistant Secretary has said relating to how SolarAPP Plus, of course, aligns with the CEDO mission and ultimately your goals and objectives at the department.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And so CEDO's mission is to drive the affordable deployment of solar energy on the grid and to accelerate our movement to a clean energy future in line with the goals of the DOE and this administration. So as Secretary Granholm likes to say, it's all about deployment right now. To reach the 100% carbon-free electricity goals by 2035, we need to increase deployment by 3 to 4 times of solar energy. This means faster siting, faster permitting, faster interconnection, so that we can really drive down those costs. As our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary was mentioning, solar modules have gone down 80% in the last decade in terms of cost, but the permitting processes to put them on the roofs have not really achieved similar gains. Soft costs account for 60% of rooftop solar energy installations. And so using SolarAPP is our effort to lower those costs. And it's important for everyone to know that permitting has the ability to impact other soft costs too, such as project cancellation and others. So it's a very high leverage point for driving down the cost of residential rooftop solar energy technologies and storage-driven technologies as well. Just to put this all in context, last year, project delays cost homeowners in the neighborhood of $16 million in ungenerated energy. So it's just a really great opportunity, which is why we think SolarAPP is such a high leverage point for the administration and for the country.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And I definitely agree with you, certainly with the goals and the expectations of where solar and storage can be in the future, certainly looking for opportunities to not just deploy it, but to deploy it more efficiently and of course faster is always of importance to us here at the laboratory, and then also nationwide as well. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit more too about how, from your perspective, SolarAPP empowers local governments to meet their renewable energy or climate goals. How do we partner with them to achieve those goals?
Sure. And so again, we're aiming for 100% carbon-free electricity grid by 2035. And the Solar Energy Technology Office wants to work with local governments and other localities to be able to deploy solar as rapidly as possible, hence SolarAPP Plus and a number of other efforts that we have. So we funded the National Renewable Energy Lab with support from other local governments, code officials, large companies who are doing deployment in the space, to bring together all of these parties to really develop a tool that will work for everyone and really try to narrow down the time it takes to permit. SolarAPP Plus makes it easier for local jurisdictions to speed these application times, and we'll see some of that data later today, and deal with ever-increasing volumes of solar permitting applications. SolarAPP Plus also is available at no cost to jurisdictions, which we think is great. Now, it will take some time and effort to get things integrated into systems, but it's being designed such that it can easily integrate into potentially existing systems as well. And so we're really excited to see how this can move things forward and accelerate permitting at the local level. And we welcome all of you from local governments or other stakeholders to reach out to the National Renewable Energy Lab, figure out how we can involve so we can all solve solar permitting, ultimately solar soft costs, and ultimately the decarbonization of the US economy. Jeff, you might be muted.
Thanks for that, Garrett. And I think there's no better way to continue on your conversation relating to empowering local governments by actually talking directly to a local government about how SolarAPP Plus has influenced or impacted their community. So I'd like to invite Mayor Gallego into the conversation here. Of course, the mayor from the city of Phoenix, one of the largest cities in the entire country, of course, now piloting the SolarAPP Plus product. And has been doing that for over a month now, or just about a month that we've gotten to. And so we've had over 120 some projects go through the application, so a lot that Phoenix can speak to today. So that's enough from me. Mayor Gallego, I'd love for you to introduce yourself if you'd like, and then I'm happy to ask you the first question, which is why did City of Phoenix adopt SolarAPP Plus?
Wonderful. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. And Jeff, thank you for the introduction. By background, I have an environmental degree and actually was a Department of Energy intern in college, and then went and worked at an electric utility and energy efficiency. So I have been at a conference from International Code Council. So really appreciate all the work you do to speed up energy efficiency investments, safe places to live, and am glad to be with you here today. Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the United States and one that really tries to move forward on sustainability, including solar energy. We're pride ourselves as being leaders in this area. If I look to my west from City Hall, I see manufacturing with Actor and Nextracker doing utility scale. If I look to the east, First Solar, one of the largest solar companies, and then throughout our downtown, we see a lot of solar, but we're here today to talk about what we're doing on residential. We want to see more and more of it. We're seeing about 750 residential requests over the last 12 months, which is nearly double the applications we received 2 years ago. When I ask people in the industry what we can do to speed up deployment of solar, I think Garrett sort of teed up for this, but one of the things we do here is, could you do permitting faster? We're at about 30 days right now. We want to get that permitted as fast as possible, but we don't want to sacrifice safety, and we want to make sure that we are not just doing it quickly, but doing it well. So that was one of the reasons this partnership was very attractive to me. We think it has the potential to expedite processing for about 50% of our requests, and we hope that our residents will feel like we are being responsive to their enthusiasm for solar, as well as having a great partnership with DOE and the folks who developed the app. And we hope this will help us get more solar on roofs and help us with our net zero goals, which are quite ambitious. And being the fastest growing city in the country, we need to keep innovating if we are going to do our part on climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to allude back to, certainly we've been working in depth with your staff and they've been really helpful, and we share the vision together, right? The idea of let's permit projects as fast as we can, but ensure that they are safe and code compliant 100% of the time. And if we don't have that, then there's no need to be any faster, because that results in unsafe installations, which we absolutely don't want. So it's been really valuable working with you and the team in Phoenix to work on that. Could you speak a little bit to the how you've adopted? I know that there's been, every jurisdiction has their own unique operation, and it can be challenging, of course, to develop or implement a new process. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective about how Phoenix navigated some of those implementation issues to get to where we are today.
Wonderful. So we have been working with our planning and development department and SolarAPP to try to get ready for this pilot, which we started in June. We are focused on residential applications, and we're looking for some of our simpler applications. So right now, applications that include storage are not part of the pilot. We have 6 contractors that are working with us right now, and we are doing some checks on the permits. So sometimes we will pull them and make sure everything is going well. And so far, code requirements are going very well. So it's a 4-month pilot, and then we hope to expand to 10 contractors and then eventually take away the pilot title with it and do a full deployment. And along the way, we've talked about some of our priorities and things we wanted to see in there. So our planning development team wanted the capability for the app to detect fault current, and we appreciate working with us on just making sure we get an app that is as broadly applicable as possible, because we want to get those projects permitted and changing our city for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things. It's not only making sure we're permitting them correctly at the front end, but also that we're setting up inspectors for success at the time of inspection, so that they can take the SolarAPP related documents and actually be able to perform their inspection effectively, and also doing it within the same amount of time that they have to be able to do inspections. As you know, 5th largest city, a lot of inspections happening in Phoenix, and how critically important those inspections are. And so Phoenix has been really helpful on that inspection side. In fact, I know some projects have already been inspected. Of the 100 some odd products that are in there, some have been inspected. But of course, in this pilot, we would be doing more and more inspections to ensure that, as you said, everything is working properly, so we can look for the next phase, whether that's just going fully live with solar, or ultimately going and considering other technologies as well, which your team and our team are working on. You mentioned storage. We're definitely talking about it. So you got to start somewhere, and solar is a heck of a great place to start. And so I'd love to now transition to my next question for you, which is, Phoenix had to make this decision to pilot. It's not easy. Your team had a lot of competing priorities and things that needed their time. I'd love to hear from you what you would say to other local governments that are considering adopting SolarAPP Plus. What would your advice be for them?
To us, it's an exciting opportunity to accelerate implementation, and it's a force multiplier for our staff. Phoenix is literally the fastest growing city in the country. There is a lot of activity here. We are hiring right now. In fact, if anyone is listening, we would welcome you in the city of Phoenix if you're looking for your next home, and you might want to join our inspection team. But right now, we are seeing growth that is outpacing our ability to hire. And so having this additional tool is very exciting for us, because we don't want to slow down our residents who want to install solar. And it also, I think, frees up our staff to do a little bit more oversight and maybe focus on some of the very complex projects. It's a $25 fee to SolarAPP that the contractors pay, and they've been so far very enthusiastic about this type of innovation. So for cities that, and when I talk to other mayors, we do hear hiring is just a real challenge right now, and not just in inspectors, but this is one of our areas where there's just such a need for expertise right now. And so having an additional tool is very helpful to us. And it's really a win-win where there's pretty broad consensus across the political spectrum, more solar and more efficient processes gets a very wide berth of support. So we are excited about doing this and really appreciate all of you who made it possible.
Yeah, usually people can get behind cutting some of the administrative red tape, which is what SolarAPP is designed to do. In fact, you brought up that at the outset, Phoenix is inundated with so many solar permits that it takes you, up to 30 days to review them, not because your team is sitting around looking for something to do, but because they have such a huge amount of volume that they have to process. And so taking those review timelines from 30 days in Tucson, it's like 24 something, very similar to what you're dealing with here, and we take that from the almost a month to instantly for the projects that qualify. And for example, that's the 120 projects or so that we've run through already. That means, your team didn't have to review those. That's like 120 hours. Maybe it's a little bit less because your team's like super efficient, but point being, that's a lot of time that's freed up and that your team has the ability to look at other projects that aren't eligible that we already talked about, and also to rebalance their workload, frankly, because with all the other permits that Phoenix is dealing with, being a rapidly growing city, you have a lot of challenges that you're facing in Phoenix, and we're just happy to be here, SolarAPP, to help in what a little way we can to help not only your solar goals, but also your permitting team's goals to be as effective and efficient with their time. And so, Mayor Gallego, that concluded my questions. I want to make sure we hit on all your topics. Is there anything you wanted to make sure we mentioned that we didn't yet?
Nope, you got it. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Let's go now to hear the contractor's perspective. So we've heard from the local government side. Let's go now over to Amy Hart, Vice President of Public Policy out of Sunrun. Amy, if you wouldn't mind introducing us to Sunrun, and then, of course, telling us why do contractors want SolarAPP?
Got it. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for having us. And just want to thank the mayor for being on. And the City of Phoenix has been a great partner for Sunrun. We're really happy to be, to have been working with the city as we expand rooftop solar access to families throughout the area, and really happy to see the city leadership in adopting SolarAPP Plus. So yeah, a little bit about Sunrun. We are a residential rooftop solar and battery installation company. We're the largest residential provider of residential solar across the country. So we're in 22 different states, and including Puerto Rico and DC. And so, as you can imagine, lots of different jurisdictions, from cities to villages to towns, where we're permitting, inspecting, and installing solar for families. And it's been great to see cities like Phoenix being able to adopt that and see the benefits, because we're seeing the benefits immediately. From a contractor and an installer perspective, why do we love it? It simply, at the bottom line, creates a better customer experience all around. So that means lower costs, that means speed to install, fewer delays. So sometimes permitting delays, interconnection delays could actually stall a residential solar project by about 3, maybe even upwards of 6 months. So that's before the installation and then at the end. So being able to really address the permitting applications and reducing that time at the beginning can be just critical from a customer experience perspective, but also saves us days of work, and we can get up on the roofs faster and actually reduce the cost of the system. So that the delays, those soft cost delays, are not cutting the red tape, can actually add thousands of dollars to the cost of a system. And so we know we need every tool in our toolbox to try to make our solar projects more accessible to everybody, more than ever before, when we're hitting energy prices the way that we are across the country. But also, from a homeowner, when you sign a contract and you make the decision to say, I'm going to go solar, you actually want the installers up on the roof the next day, where you're like, yep, I made a decision, I'm ready to go. The sun is shining, I want to start generating those electrons. So the faster we can work with cities and we can get projects out there, the happier our customers are, and we're able to help manage their bills. One thing I think you noted, Jeff, at the beginning, maybe it was Garrett, about the call to action is, we need to deploy. And we hear that a lot. One, there's a huge demand, but we have multiple problems that we're trying to tackle, right? There is a climate crisis. We have an energy crisis. We have calls from multiple energy, from utilities and our RTOs that are saying, hey, we might hit supply. We're having peak demand calls across the country. So every electron counts. And as the quicker we can get solar on rooftops, the better. Now, the Department of Energy is fabulous. I will say I had the opportunity to work for the city of Milwaukee through the Solar America Cities program and the SolSmart program way back when. And so the Department of Energy has always been helping cities to advance clean energy. We do know that there are other parts of DC and the federal government that are in a bit of a gridlock trying to tackle the climate crisis and trying to have some clean energy policy. So this SolarAPP Plus opportunity, which is free for jurisdictions to do, is the easiest thing that mayors and leadership at a city level can do to advance clean energy and to get those solutions out there. While conversations are still going to happen in DC, this is a real opportunity to act and make a concerted effort to say, yes, we're going to make this commitment. Let's start working on piloting that project and, quite honestly, making sure that it's still safe. Right, like the mayor had said, having the inspections at the end, making sure we're meeting all of those standards is key for our families, our customers, and also cities. So we've been really happy to participate, and our staff has been excited to participate because they know that frees them up to process the other projects we need to get done.
I could say something quick. I'm just thrilled that Amy brought up SolSmart as we're continuing that program. We've just announced kind of the next group of people we're going to be taking that into the future over the next 5 years. And so for those of you working in local government thinking, okay, permitting is one thing, but what's the full universe of things I can be doing to help solar deployment on my end? Please learn about SolSmart, engage with SolSmart. There's some great resources, technical assistance, and other things that you could be doing to be able to just kind of attack as much as possible to streamlining solar deployment in your community. One of which is SolarAPP, but there's a number of other ways you can be working as well. So thank you, Franny, for bringing that up.
Absolutely, and we, of course, at the SolarAPP team are also very excited about the SolSmart program. We are a part of the SolSmart program as well, and we encourage our folks that are interested in SolarAPP to also consider and, of course, participate in SolSmart, because SolarAPP is a great way to streamline permitting, which is the intent of SolSmart. But there's also other aspects or activities you can do to really ensure that you have our future, where you can permit, install, and inspect solar all within the context of a week, if not faster. That's definitely possible today and happens in quite a few places. And so it's certainly true there. And I know, Amy, you've also brought up, of course, that a lot of contractors, that your team has been very involved in the SolarAPP process, and we encourage contractors across the country to get involved, whether it's, of course, speaking to jurisdictions for which you have relationships where you permit a lot, letting them know SolarAPP exists, letting them know that it's something that they could consider, that it's free for them, are all things that other contractors, of course, could do, like the Sunrun team has been doing, of course, and we appreciate you doing that, Amy. So with that, I think I'm going to move now back to Joan. So welcome back, Joan. Thank you so much again for participating. And so my question to you is, of course, there was an ICC press release, an announcement relating to the SolarAPP, and I'd love for you to describe what that was and what it should mean to local government.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and it's great hearing everyone on the panel. I think the momentum is building for SolarAPP Plus, which is exciting. As I mentioned, the ICC has had a long-standing relationship with the DOE, of course, but also with NREL and Jeff's team, really from the inception of SolarAPP Plus. So to see where we are today, starting a few years ago, and the goals that we've achieved and the milestones is really just incredible. We've actually issued 2 press releases, one that we were joining forces and we had combined efforts really to review those permitting specifications for clean energy technologies and for battery storage systems that did and we're going to integrate with SolarAPP Plus. And so the initial press release we issued is that we were, kind of joining forces in this collaboration. And the goal is really to increase adoption of SolarAPP Plus and with the local governments that are using the model codes developed by the ICC. So we're also further assisting in increasing the SolarAPP awareness and usage with jurisdictions, and we're all of our direct engagement. We've had chapter meetings. We've obviously have been hosting webinars. We've been engaging with our members, we've been soliciting feedback, and it's really been an incredible collaboration because we've been able to give that direct feedback to the SolarAPP team and the NREL team, really to build momentum. And probably most importantly, that's important for all of you on the webinar today, is that the ICC really, after completing a very thorough technical review to assess the code compliance of the SolarAPP, that it does align with the International Building Code, the International Residential Codes for residential rooftop solar, PV and battery storage. And why this is so important, and it aligns to the 2018 code cycle and the 2021, is that really, in my opinion, just shows the collaboration that the two organizations have had. And again, the mission of the ICC, how it's so important, not only building safe communities, worldwide, but sustainable communities. And that's where, our involvement, we're going to continue. We've made a commitment to review all of the applications that are released. So our technical team, which is really top of the line, top notch, and they're going to be reviewing every release. And so you can be assured that it has the approval, again, that the SolarAPP application aligns with the code, the most recent code, I-codes.
And we want to thank Joan, your staff, so much, and you, of course, and everyone at ICC for the partnership, the collaboration, the support, and also the review. It takes a lot of time and expertise to check work and to certainly look through the SolarAPP and confirm it's working properly. And we're excited about that. And it goes to what Mayor Gallegos was saying as well, which is that what's important here is safety. Safety first, which is, of course, in alignment with ICC's mission, has always been in alignment with NREL and, of course, the SolarAPP Plus. And so to get this announcement just goes to what we've all been working towards and we've been committed to since the beginning, which is to prove that the systems that are approved as submitted are, in fact, code compliant. But to build on that, Joan, I'd love to hear a little bit more, too, because ICC's recently expanded your mission and would love for you to add a little bit more on that and how, of course, SolarAPP naturally fits.
Sure. So we actually recently, and there's a big thunderstorm right outside my window. So if anyone hears noise, it's a thunderstorm. I'm based in New York City, so apologize for the background noise. But yes, the ICC recently launched Code on a Mission Challenge, and the challenge really is to get over a third of the U.S. population covered by energy codes, based on our IECC, which is our International Energy Conservation Code. And really, again, the goal of the challenge is by the end of 2023. The recently enacted Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act will make available really an unprecedented $225 million investment towards energy code implementation. There's $550 million for energy efficiency and a conservation block grant for $500 million for the state energy program. So all of this really is moving towards, again, what the mission is of the ICC in terms of really build, safety and sustainable communities worldwide. So this aligns really 100% with NREL and the SolarAPP Plus mission. And so I think over the next really year and a half, we're going to see this momentum build, especially with this additional investment coming from our federal and state governments.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I would just add from that conversation, Joan, is, of course, that as you'd said, SolarAPP aligns with the newest model codes, the 18 and 21 vintages of the I codes, but we're also going to be continuing to upgrade and move forward into the future. And you'd also mentioned that, and the criticality of that being that as storage and solar technologies evolve, the code evolves with them. And ensuring that jurisdictions are enforcing the most up-to-date code means that they're also able to address or enforce code related to the newest technologies that are enabled by those codes or supported with that code language. And so just another point for our commitment with ICC going forward is to make sure that, of course, SolarAPP continues to upgrade with the codes as they come out, which we're, of course, already looking forward to the next code cycle, even though we just released the past cycle. So,
yeah,
and
just
by the way,
on that point, Jeff, just to further that point, as right now we're very focused on the 2021 adoption, and to your point, because 2018 and 2021 align with SolarAPP Plus, we want to get those jurisdictions that are on older code cycles into the newer code cycles, because we do think there's a benefit that they align with SolarAPP Plus. And we're already, we already had our first cycle of hearings for the 2024, and in September we have our annual conference again and hearings for that 2024 cycle. So the timing is actually, well aligned as well.
Agreed. Yeah, SolarAPP will be at that conference. I'll plug it for ICC. Everyone should definitely go and participate in that. A great conversation and discussion sure to be had there. And then, by the way, Joan, if you could send some of that rain back over here to Colorado, we'd appreciate it. So if you could work your magic for that. So thank you so much, Joan. I'll go over then to Ken from UL. Ken Boyce, of course, the Senior Director of Principal Engineering over at UL. And of course, UL is going to be working in a long-term partnership with NREL that, of course, Ken will allude to. In fact, let's jump right into that. Ken, I know, as you know, that UL was selected as the long-term host to be the program manager of SolarAPP going forward once it's transitioned from NREL. And so I'd love to hear a little bit from you about, UL's commitment to the application, why you believe in it, how it fits in with your mission over at UL.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's really a pleasure to be here with this panel of experts. So UL Solutions really in its core is a mission-driven company, and we focus on applying safety science to promote global safety, security, and sustainability. That's in our DNA. That's what we do every single day across the world. And so as we look at the SolarAPP Plus tool, we just see that as a really innovative, really compelling solution really across all of those strategic objectives that we are working on across our enterprise. And it's one of the things that drove us to really get engaged with SolarAPP Plus development really from the very onset. So our teams of experts have been really engaged with the SolarAPP Plus development team, the NREL team, to really work toward promoting the full promise of this really, really wonderful tool. We see SolarAPP Plus as a critical enabler of safe, code-compliant, and consistent methods for accelerated permitting for renewable energy installations. And that's, as we've heard from really everybody, it's really important that we continue to advance that work. SolarAPP Plus facilitates people, facilitates communities and jurisdictions all meeting their goals for sustainability, and that's needed now more than ever. But as we've said several times, it has to be done safely, right? The foundation of all of that really important work on sustainability has to be built on that foundation of safety. And we know those significant increases in deployment of renewables are critical for our future. So SolarAPP Plus has that great role in accelerating the pace of those installations in practical and in safe ways. We've been very focused in supporting regulatory authorities for 128 years in their essential role of addressing safe infrastructure in their communities. They're really key players in making sure those communities are safe, and we want to continue to foster ways that makes their really critical job more practically attainable. And so we see SolarAPP Plus fitting right into that. And so really for all of these reasons, we've had our team of experts fully committed to the development of SolarAPP Plus and continue to work toward further development, really working on National Electrical Code alignment, and we just saw a new edition of the National Electrical Code in the final stages of being processed. That'll be out probably next month. And that kind of work really is important as we go forward to make it easy for people to get these rooftop solar and renewable energy installations. So we're thrilled to be named as the long-term host and are fully committed to continuing to let SolarAPP Plus unlock its full promise for helping communities and people do what they need to do in this energy world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ken. And piggybacking or pointing out as well that UL's commitment certainly has been significant to us, and it's been really just like ICC has been working with us on looking at our alignment with code. UL's been collaborating with us in the development of the SolarAPP process. I know there was a few questions in the chat about this. In fact, what is the development process of SolarAPP? Well, it started with meetings, right? Like Ken and I and ICC and other folks were all in a meeting and said, hey, how would you permit a project instantly? Knowing, of course, that some had done it. So Los Angeles, of course, being a particular community that's been doing instant online permitting for residential rooftop systems since 2013. So there was a precedent for it. However, doing it in a way that can be done and scaled for everybody nationwide was our call to action. And of course, UL being committed throughout that whole time, helping us get to here, and of course, taking us into the next frontier of this when we expand to, as Joan said, the new code cycles, et cetera. So huge thank you, of course, to UL for that support. I saw a bunch of other questions in the chat, and I should say for folks, please do continue to put questions there, and we will pick them up as we have the ability to. In fact, I saw a lot about what is the SolarAPP process and how are we doing? Does it save time? Where is it being used? How does it work? All sorts of aspects that we are about to talk about in our session now. And so I'm going to go ahead and thank my panelists again for their great discussion today. And now I'm going to shift us into a look at the data. So a look at the performance review aspects of this. So thanks again to the team here, our roundtable panelists again. So now, what is SolarAPP doing and how is it performing? So we will jump into this aspect of the session today. So NREL did an analysis of SolarAPP in its first year, of course, which the Assistant Secretary referenced at the beginning of this session. The link to that is available, and we'll be able to share that with all the registrants after this webinar. What this analysis did was looked at NREL's performance, SolarAPP's performance, of course, NREL implementing it over the course of the past year. Now, certainly we're into July, almost August of 2022, so a lot has happened since 21. The analysis here focused on that year, but I will, of course, mention elements and let you know about how we're doing this current year. Now, of course, that Phoenix adopted this year, which of course wasn't reflected in 21 as one example. So in 2021, there were 10 jurisdictions in Arizona and California that were using the system. In that year, we issued 3,200 permits. We've already issued 8,500 permits today, so we've doubled in the first months of 2022 the amount of permits going through the system, which is really exciting. Importantly, overall, SolarAPP projects that go through our system are installed 13 business days faster than traditional projects. So other projects in the same jurisdiction submitted through the traditional paper process take 2.5 weeks longer to install than SolarAPP Plus projects. And that doesn't mean they're installed instantly, right? We permit them instantly. They aren't installed immediately after in most cases, but they're still installed over 2 weeks faster. And that means that the homeowner is getting solar 2 weeks faster than they otherwise would. We estimate that SolarAPP saves between 15 minutes and 60 minutes per plan that's submitted. So when you heard us talking before about Phoenix, they've had 129 projects or 130 or so projects that have gone through SolarAPP. If you estimate that as 60 hours a pop, that's 130 hours of savings. Of course, a bit less, about a quarter of that, 50 hours or so savings if you're looking at it in terms of 15 minutes. But that's real savings to the plan check staff from not having to do this review, from the contractor not having to drive into the office to stand in line to get the permit. Those hours, of course, are separate and not calculated in relation to the jurisdiction, but is real time saved. Importantly, projects permitted, certainly in SolarAPP, are only good if we're not negatively impacting inspection processes, and we'll talk about that. But importantly, the projects going through SolarAPP are not failing more frequently. In fact, they're failing less frequently at time of inspection than those projects that go through the traditional process, suggesting there are quality improvements ongoing, or higher quality SolarAPP submissions could be resulting in higher quality return or on inspection pass rates at the other end. So that is, of course, also of interest to the SolarAPP Coalition. So in summary, a lot of jurisdictions were piloting it in 2021. I'll let you know we've doubled the amount of jurisdictions that are a part of the coalition now, with 20, I believe it's 21 now, that are now piloting or have fully adopted the application. So rapid growth there. Of course, there are a lot of communities that are in the implementation and decision-making process. There may be several of them on this call right now, so I hope that this conversation is useful to you. In fact, there are jurisdictions across the country. You can see them on the map here. A lot of interest, of course, in California, which makes a lot of sense. California has a lot of solar volume, a lot of jurisdictions in California are dealing with hundreds of applications per month. And of course, there are also growing communities where they're dealing with other permitting applications. And so a lot of communities are engaged. Of course, we hope more will engage after this call. So why aren't more communities using SolarAPP? Well, it takes time to implement SolarAPP. So you heard the mayor of Phoenix speak to this, that it took time to discuss the requirements in Phoenix, implement that into the software, and carry it forward. And so you can see that communities are starting to improve their adoption timelines. As we get through the first adopters, we've been having it be faster adoption, which is why 2022, we're seeing a doubling of communities using the application, and we expect to see even more, as many as 60 jurisdictions, hopefully, by the end of the year, if not more, using SolarAPP. Of course, after that, then we can expect a continued rapid increase of adoption as communities get through their own procurement and implementation processes. So just gives you a sense of how much time it can take a jurisdiction to adopt. And of course, SolarAPP is here, and our coalition is here to help you through your adoption process if that's of interest to you. So how many applications are going through SolarAPP? You can see that here, most in Tucson, and this is, of course, 2021 data. If Phoenix were here, they'd already be between Simi Valley and San Ramon there in the number of projects that have been permitted. So certainly a lot of volume in Phoenix. But what you can see here is a rapid or a significant amount of permits in a bunch of different communities. In addition, you're seeing that a lot of permits are revised. SolarAPP can also complete the code compliance checks or plan review for revised permits. And so the solar industry seems to revise permits at a relatively high rate, and that can be because a homeowner wants adjustments to how the project is designed. They might want a little bit extra power. They might decide to go that they want solar, and then later on they want to add storage. So there's a lot of changes. And SolarAPP removes all of those revision reviews as well, which can add time savings to the jurisdiction that otherwise had to review each and every one of those revisions as well. And now, in addition, there were comments and questions in the box about issues with contractors, right? If contractors would only submit complete applications and that have code-compliant applications the first time, jurisdictions would be able to permit them a lot faster because you don't have to do the code corrections or your plan corrections. Send it back to the contractor, have the contractor review those, send another one back to you. You have to look at that one again. In short, performing the quality assurance checks that on behalf of the contractor happens in a lot of jurisdictions today. SolarAPP removes that requirement and ensures that every system that goes through it is code compliant the first time with no review from the jurisdiction. So with some projects, you might have to put your hands on it 4 or 5 times. SolarAPP, you don't have to do it at all, and it does the work for you, and the contractor can work with SolarAPP if they have questions about why their project is not permittable within the system itself. And so that can help jurisdictions as well with that hidden cost of continuous reviews of projects. So how is SolarAPP addressing volume? So you heard from the mayor that they expect that it could result in covering 50% of their projects. And that's pretty in line with what we're seeing in communities that have gone to full adoption here. And so some, it's a little bit less, some it's a bit more, and it typically depends on how long it takes to get a permit reviewed and approved in your community. If it's pretty fast to do it, oftentimes SolarAPP might have a little bit lower rate, like Pleasant Hill, for example. You get your reviews from that office back in, same day. However, in Pleasant Hill, the reason they adopted it is to provide contractors with another opportunity or pathway to get their permit. So it's just better customer service and allowing them another option. And then, of course, in Tucson, up to 62% of volume covered there. You can see here, that's in converse with the amount of time it takes to get a permit. A lot of folks on this call say they permit solar relatively quickly. That's great to hear. You could still be like Pleasant Hill and provide another option for contractors and also benefit from the fact that you don't have to review those projects because the software can do it. So that's one example. For those that are more like Tucson and Phoenix that are so inundated with permits they can't review them on time or in a timely fashion, that is a situation where SolarAPP can help an immediate benefit for you, but also an immediate benefit for the contractor, like Amy Hart was mentioning earlier, for the contractor having certainty of when they can get their permit to effectively install their system. On average, we find that most permitting authorities do their permit reviews in about a 2-week time period. So you can still put people between sort of that Sonoma County and San Ramon section of this product. So there are costs to implement SolarAPP, and each jurisdiction has those. For example, in Phoenix, we had to have meetings with their staff, and those meetings can take time. However, every community in 2021 for which we tracked have recouped their costs or benefited and now are saving time and resources that we reflect on costs here relative to the implementation hours that were needed. So certainly it does take a little bit of time, between 50 and 100 hours, sometimes 10 and 100 hours, depending on what jurisdiction you are and what model you're using to adopt. But ultimately here you can see a lot of time savings reflected for each jurisdiction. And of course, for more details on all of this and how we calculated it, you can check the detailed report. Now, I'd mentioned inspections at the front half. Importantly, inspectors do not have a lot of time to go out and inspect systems. They have a lot of inspections they have to do. They don't just do solar inspections. And so we have also, the SolarAPP product has a new inspection process. There's a checklist that's generated for which the inspector uses, so it is different. A key idea or goal of SolarAPP is to ensure that the inspectors helped us generate that checklist from the outset so that they could effectively implement it in the time that they have to do their inspections. So we aren't adding time to inspections. They are basically the same. We hope in the future that inspection times can go down as inspectors get used to the SolarAPP inspection checklist, in part because it's one consistent checklist. They use it for every solar job regardless of what contractor applied. So that can help, because if there are any inspectors on the call, certainly plan reviewers know that designs and plans look different, sometimes even within a contractor versus, and certainly across those contractors. And you've already heard me mention as well that we are not increasing inspection failure rates. They are comparable, if not lower, than the traditional inspection failure rates within each of the communities. So really that just goes to show the win-win-win aspect of this. It's not causing challenges to inspectors. It's not causing it's saving time for permitting staff. It's saving time for the contractors. And oh, by the way, it's saving time for the homeowner, as we articulated earlier, resulting in faster installation of safe, code-compliant systems. And so with that, and those reductions in the timelines, we're seeing 30,000 or more eliminated days in the time it takes to get adoption. And so that's really exciting on how much time we've eliminated from the process by purely using SolarAPP Plus, and oh, by the way, doing it code compliant and safely each and every time, as we've been talking about this entire time. So like I said, there is a report where you can find and dissect all of the results from our first year. We'll be doing another analysis in 2022 to show you the rapid growth of SolarAPP and how we continue to perform in that upcoming, or this current year, I should say. And so with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing there. And I believe there are still quite a few questions, and we've got at least a few minutes to go through as many of those as we can. All right. So thank you again for everybody submitting your questions and feedback. Seeing them in the document, I did want to say there were a couple of questions about fees collected. The mayor commented that SolarAPP is a $25 charge to the contractors to pay. Of course, Sunrun confirmed they are happy to pay for that because of the business certainty they get. However, some communities are considering adjusting their plan review fees. For example, Simi Valley removed their plan review fee. That was $150 or something like that. So there is a savings in that community, and there's several other communities doing that as well, where it's actually cheaper for the contractor to get a SolarAPP project permitted and approved within our system than to go the regular plan review process. Now, I saw that there were several comments about contractor quality as well, which I alluded to before. And the hope of the SolarAPP is that can also improve quality over time, because contractors will now have certainty for what code requirements are, how they are implemented into the software, and what a code compliant system is. And so the ability then for the SolarAPP to help improve quality is one of our goals. In addition, we suspect it will continue to improve inspection quality because there will be a checklist that the inspector uses that will be available to the contractor to use. And so the contractor can go at the end of their install and make sure that everything on the checklist matches their installation so that they are in fact a code compliant system and will get a passed inspection. So instead of having uncertainty about what an inspector is going to look for, SolarAPP will have that clearly every time. Now, there are a bunch of questions I see about eligibility, what kind of project can go in SolarAPP versus which ones cannot. There's a whole list of eligibility criteria on the website to point out the type of projects that can be incorporated. So for example, if you have an existing PV system on site, SolarAPP can't approve that. And SolarAPP also can't approve it if you're going to mix and match racking equipment or the type of the design of the system. So there are certain boundaries for SolarAPP, which is why not all volume can go through it. And of course, SolarAPP is not designed to replace the permitting systems that jurisdictions have. It's meant to augment it for the types of systems for which it can approve. And so again, I think we still have a couple of minutes, so I can go through a couple more questions. There were, again, a few questions about how does SolarAPP actually influence timelines? I just wanted to clarify that SolarAPP delivers an instant permit for code compliance systems. That is, it's immediately permit job card issued. And for example, in Phoenix, it takes them 30 days to review and approve the application. Now, that's not 30 days of staff time. It's just from the time it was submitted to the time the jurisdiction was actually able to review it is about 30 days, so that they can approve it in 15 minutes. But the fact is they had to get to the permit, and that's really the delay. So we removed the delay that it takes for them to review, but the review itself may only have been 15 minutes. And of course, in our performance review, we track that those hours in active review times and not in days for the jurisdictions and their time savings. All right. With that, I'm looking back through to see what other questions are there and see if I missed any ones that are general. Just wanted to make sure people knew that there will be a link, of course, for registration, or sorry, a link to the slides, the recording, and the presentation. If you are interested in learning more about how the software works, we have bi-weekly demonstration calls, and so you're welcome to join one of those. We'll, of course, make those available to you for registrants. We also have onboarding calls. If this was enough for you and you want to learn about how you can sign your community up for SolarAPP, we also have regular calls for that on a bi-weekly basis as well. And of course, we encourage you to reach out to us to learn more about the application and to get your questions answered. And so you can, of course, engage with ICC that's hosting this webinar to get back to us with your follow-up questions. And then the last bit I want to leave you with is I did see a question in here is what if a contractor lies, right? What if they figure out a code compliance system and they input that into SolarAPP? Well, they can lie today in your current process. A contractor can come up with the perfect plan and give it to your plan check staff, and they would say this is code compliant, and they would approve it. And then that means the inspector is the last line of defense for a bad acting contractor to be able, and they would see clearly that this plan, this inspection checklist doesn't match at all what you installed. You're going to fail your inspection. And that is exactly how the process works. Of course, if there is a continual bad actor, it's within the jurisdiction's right to have enforcement actions on them, either pulling their license or pulling their authority to work in SolarAPP, et cetera. So again, we're not saying that there shouldn't be inspections of systems. In fact, I would emphatically argue there should be inspections of solar systems as they are being inspected today. Rather, the SolarAPP just allows a different way to inspect those systems. And so again, I want to thank everyone for participating today. I want to thank all of my panelists on the roundtable and ICC for letting us have this webinar. Thank you. And I think I'll pass it back to ICC to wrap up.
Great. Great. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you all the panelists, and actually for all the wonderful questions. So we have recorded this. We'll make this available. We'll be sending emails out to all the participants. If you do have a question that you feel was not answered, let us know. ICC, again, works very closely with Jeff, so we'll make sure we get you that answer. And please stay active, stay connected. We have a lot of communication on SolarAPP Plus, and it's just going to be growing and new exciting developments every day. So thank you again for your time, and we look forward to our next session together. Thanks, Jeff.